Hey there, everyone. It is Melanie Matthews Calhoun of the Get Engaged Coaching Group, and I am so extraordinarily thrilled to have my guest with me this evening, the one, the only, Diane Sweeney. I am so glad that she's joining us, and we have a lot to talk about. So, before I get into our conversation, I just like to, as if you don't already know, read this bio of Diane. So, Diane Sweeney has been an author and educational consultant since 1999. The author of Leading Student Centered Coaching, The Moves, Student Centered Coaching at the Secondary Level, and Student Centered Coaching, a guide for K-8 coaches and principals. Diane holds a long-standing interest in how adult learning translates to learning in the classroom. Diane holds a bachelor's degree from the University of Denver and a master's in bilingual and multicultural education from the University of Colorado Boulder. After teaching and coaching in the Denver public schools, Diane served as a program officer at the Public Education and Business Coalition in Denver. Since then, she has become a respected voice in the field of coaching and professional development. And without further ado, thank you and welcome, Diane.
It's great to be here. And I had such a fun time connecting with you when I was in Wayne County, Michigan. So it was fun to meet you in person and follow up on that experience with you today. So thanks for the
Yes,
invitation.
same. And thanks for taking the time to sit with me this
Oh, for
evening.
sure, for
So
sure.
before we get into our grand conversation, this is a question that I ask every guest on the show who's in education in some way, shape, or form, leadership, instructional, administrative. How did you get started with instructional coaching?
Probably a common story, but I got started because I realized how hard it was to teach. I honestly, I was a four five teacher in Denver public schools, and I had a coach. And
Hmm.
my coach this was very early in coaching
Hmm.
work. There wasn't really a structure or a method, but somehow they got some resources put together. I was in a Title I school to
Hmm.
get some support for teachers. And so the idea of coaching really came to me by being a receiver of coaching and
Hmm.
realizing that, man, I thought I was prepared to teach when I finished my teaching certification program.
Hmm.
Man, I wasn't prepared to teach, and I needed a partner. And the whole idea of adult learning was compelling to me, and the idea that we can be bringing support into classrooms with teachers that's a lot would add to the professional learning style that we had all experienced.
Hmm.
The traditional professional development was okay, and I loved that. I was at all of those things, but as a teacher, but to have coaching made a huge difference for
Hmm.
me.
Hmm. And and I am a coach who I think needs a coach. Like I don't
Yep.
want to do this coaching thing alone. I need someone to
Yeah.
coach me through this coaching thing. Although
Yes.
I've been at it for about 16 years, it's still I need someone to coach me along with coaching teachers. So I understand that classroom piece. Yes, indeed.
I still have a coach. She's a different person, but still have a
Uh-huh.
coach to this day. So
Hmm.
we have a call tomorrow to talk through our work. So it's
Yes.
great. It's such an important thing
Hmm.
that we provide to teachers.
Hmm. And for teachers to take advantage of it is just, I think, the most important thing that they could do for their personal learning and to
Yeah.
build their capacity to have an advantage of having coaches on site. That is the ultimate in job embedded professional development.
Yes.
And so I think it's just, phenomenal for us to be able to have coaches that we can tap into when
Yeah.
things are going wrong and when things are going right. Not
Yeah,
only
you're
when
right.
they're going wrong, but when
Right.
things are going on, and to be able to bounce ideas off of back and forth. So, when you were coaching or when you were in the classroom working with your coach, did your coach have a specific program or protocol for coaching that they used at that time?
No, that was before any of that
Hmm.
had happened. Coaching, she wasn't even, I think, called a coach. I think we called her a staff developer back then.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it
Mm-hmm.
was early days. I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but it was early days in this work. And I think I just had a smart principal who knew that Title One, like I said, Title One resources could go directly into core instruction. And this was
Mm-hmm.
again before even tier one, tier two, tier three was even a conversation. So
Mm-hmm.
no, didn't really have a method which or a framework to follow, which kind of led me to developing student-centered coaching, honestly. There was a
Mm-hmm.
connection there.
And so I'm glad that you said that because what are there elements of you being coached that you use to form student center coaching?
Yeah, that's such a great question.
Mm-hmm.
If I go back to sort of a pivotal experience I had in creating student-centered coaching, it was so this I had coaching and then I got to become a literacy coach in
Mm-hmm.
that same school. And I had my friend Charmaine Keaton was the math coach. So we had two of us and I was so when I was excited to be a coach. I knew that was my lane.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't have any framework to follow because one really didn't exist yet. And what I was doing is I was doing a lot of teacher-centered work in this,
Mm-hmm.
and by that I mean I was very much going into classrooms, seeing how teachers were doing, making suggestions, trying to have conversations about what they could do differently. I would dare to say what they should do differently.
Mm-hmm.
For a struggling 100% free and reduced lunch school, so the needs were very intense. And so I was kind of going in, modeling lessons, watching teachers, trying to make suggestions. And then I loved professional development, as I said earlier. And what I would do is I would create all of these other opportunities for teachers to learn, book
Mm-hmm.
studies, professional learning after school sessions, and things based on what I thought they needed. And then I had this conversation that I'll never forget where I was meeting with a colleague and I was telling her all the exciting things I was doing. And she looked at me and she said, "But what about the kids, Diane?" And I
Mm.
felt like I was so humiliated in that moment, honestly, because I was like, kids, I was just thinking about the adults. My job is the adults. And she's like, no, your job isn't just the adults. Your job is the kids,
Mm-hmm.
especially in a school with the needs you have. And it's funny because she was a district leader in Denver Public Schools. And years later, I brought this up to her. I said, that conversation is what led me to start creating student-centered coaching. And of course, you'll guess it, she doesn't even remember the conversation. Yet it shaped my entire career.
Uh-huh.
That moment, I mean, I remember being in her cubicle I just remember it so vividly. And I think I remember it because that was a moment when I had to reckon with what I thought made sense. And I had
Mm-hmm.
to go back and think, actually, how do I make sure nobody ever questions if my work is
Mm.
impacting the students? And so I went through all of my materials, all of my ways of coaching, all of my agendas, my logs, everything. And I
Mm-hmm.
I looked at them and I looked at each thing and I said, are the kids here? Are the kids clearly here?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what led me to creating student-centered coaching. And the first thing I did was start using student evidence. That was
Mm-hmm.
how I held myself accountable to making sure kids were there. They're there because we're using their work. We're watching them in classrooms. We're engaging with them in classrooms. We're using that student evidence all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And other things shifted too, but that was my biggest first shift was
Mm-hmm.
making sure kids are in the and then I gradually started crafting this framework for student-centered coaching.
Yeah, because adult learning is my passion as well. And when you said the principal or whomever asked, well, what about the kids?
Uh-huh.
So often we get into that bubble where it's all about making sure the adults know or what we think they should know, or according to whatever curriculum resources. And it's not easy. It's not hard to lose sight of who the focus is, and it's the kids. And I know that, through us, the kids will get, but I think it had to be more intentional, which is what
Yes.
you've done with this. And I would have to say student-centered coaching has influenced so many instructional coaches, not only here, but around the world. What do you think has made it resonate so deeply?
Well, I think that approach that we just named, where we're in that bubble, I love that you use that word bubble, of
Mhm,
the adult side of things, creates tension.
mhm,
And the tension is, man, this coach is coming in telling me what I should do, doesn't respect what I do, doesn't understand how hard my job is, doesn't know my kids. We don't have a trusting relationship, yet they're coming in with all the answers. And that
mhm,
inherently is flawed. And it's flawed because we're not able to, I mean, we can partner with some people that way. I always had a
mhm,
few teachers who were fine. They were like, great, let's do it. But a lot aren't. And so
mhm,
I think why student-centered coaching has resonated is it gets us away from that trap of
mhm,
going in and fixing teachers. And I have to
mhm,
say, the majority of coaching frameworks out there are pretty deficit toward teachers. I mean, I don't think they mean to be. I'm not
mhm,
saying they were designed that way, but I think teachers feel a lot of times like, dang, this coach, the way they're working feels
mhm,
really judgmental. And
mhm,
when we shift our focus to setting goals for student learning together, so if I was coaching you, we would say, what do we want your students to learn? And it's standards-based work.
mhm,
That alone is such a game changer. And it's coaches feel success immediately when they make that pivot
mhm.
to making coaching about what do we want students to know, and let's work together to get them there.
Hmm. And I
Um,
think when we set those student focused, standards-based goals,
yes,
it kind of eliminates the angst from some of the
exactly.
teachers, because that in itself puts it on the students. Like, what is it that we want these students to know and
Yeah,
learn and be able to do by the time they exit your class or by the end of this report card marking or near the end of the semester, whatever that benchmark is. And I
yeah,
think that's the magic pixie dust there.
yeah, yes.
I, I think that's it. And and as wonderful as that is when we start that way, what's one misconception do you think
Uh,
teachers have about student-centered coaching?
well, I would say even can I start with a misconception coaches sometimes have about
Yes.
student-centered coaching, or generally people have, I think is we emphasize so much what we've been talking about already, which is the student learning is our goal, and student learning, student learning, student learning. I
Mm-hmm.
think sometimes people think that we don't work on instruction. We don't build
Mm-hmm.
capacity with the instructional side of things. And I think that's almost silly because if we're going to set a goal for what we want students to learn, then the next breath is, and what instructionally will we do to get them there?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's truly that marriage between the goal for students and the moves teachers use. And I'd say our work really lives in tier one, right? In a
Mm-hmm.
core setting. So how does a teacher balance all of the needs in a classroom, all of those students, all of how do we help them teach really well,
Mm-hmm.
and meet that goal for student learning? But the we part there is important. It's a partnership.
Mm-hmm.
How are we going to get kids to the goal? And
Mm-hmm.
I think that misconception that it is instructionally not, it doesn't focus on instruction is
Mm-hmm.
it's definitely a misconception I
Mm-hmm.
hear.
And it's strange that you would say that because I've never, and I guess because I've been living this work for so long, but I've
Uh,
never seen one without the other.
I
Like
know
how
you
how
can't
can you
really.
do it? How can you set goals without the instructional piece coming next? Or
Yes.
how can you, I mean, it's that was a light bulb moment for me, like, really? But
Yeah.
you don't know what you don't know. And I had never thought of it like that, but that's a really good misconception.
Uh-huh.
Um, and then another thing is, especially coaches, because I'm still coaching, work with
Yeah.
a diverse group of teachers. We
Yeah.
have teachers who are extremely receptive. They're ready to try everything we're suggesting. They want to partner. They want to
Yeah.
sit side by side. And then we have teachers who are like, okay, well, maybe we'll give it a shot. I'm going to
Yep.
make an appointment with you. No, I'm going to back out. And then we have veteran teachers, especially those who are near retirement.
Yes.
And they're just like, we've seen all of these things before. We know what to do. We've done it before. We can see the light at the end of the tunnel. With the myriad of teachers that we coach, what suggestions do you have for creating teacher buy-in or ownership when it
Yeah.
comes to student-centered coaching?
Yeah, that word ownership is so vital. And
Hmm.
I would say also I would add authentic engagement. So engaging
Mm.
in ways that make sense to them, not
Hmm.
just faking it or ticking a box or doing it because you're told you have to do it.
Yes.
And you're so right that there are so many different stages in our careers as teachers, different needs in a school, different
Hmm.
levels of trust with coaching. You have teachers who have to race off at the end of the day because they have
Hmm.
carpool or an ailing parent, or there's so many it's like social emotional things we navigate as
Hmm.
coaches. But I always come back to a couple key strategies when it comes to engaging teachers. And the first is just to channel Simon Sinek's work. He wrote the book Start with Why.
Hmm.
So it's the idea that we want to always help teachers understand why coaching makes sense to them.
Hmm.
And for us, clearly our why is always going to be about coaching is here because you have tricky things with your students you're trying to figure out. You have challenging units. That decimals unit is a killer. Coaching would
Hmm.
make total sense to do when you're engaging in one of your harder units of study with because we're standards based again. Or if you have that, I had a conversation with a veteran teacher this summer, and she said, "Well, I don't really need coaching. I'm retiring in a year. I'm just getting through. I'm
Hmm.
just I'm counting. She's counting the days, and she's had a great career as a teacher. I'm not judging that at all. I'm excited for her too. But I said, so what do you really love teaching? And she's like, I love teaching writing. And I said, but what do you hate teaching? I hate
Hmm.
teaching math. What if the coach partnered with you on those math units? And she's like, well, that would actually be kind of fun. That would actually
Hmm.
be something that made sense to me. So I think I'm getting at a couple things. Choice, right?
Hmm.
Engagement requires choice, but also framing it through not what do you need to do better as a teacher, but instead, what challenges are you trying to solve with your student learning?
Hmm.
And then one of my favorite stories is one of my teammates. She was just starting as a coach and she was nervous. And the first person who wanted to work with her was a teacher who was a kindergarten teacher and he was a year away from retirement. And she's like, really? I was not expecting that. Well, it was one of her best coaching cycles was
Hmm.
with this teacher, and they shored up those kindergartners to where the first grade teacher was sending him thank you notes saying, dang, this was your kids are ready for first grade. So again, we frame it through student learning as our goal,
Hmm.
and we really want to make sure teachers understand what the options are with coaching,
Hmm.
why it matters, how give them lots of choices of how they can engage,
Hmm.
and make sure it just feels like it's responsive.
Hmm.
Those are all things I would think about are important when it comes to engaging
Hmm.
all different types of teachers. And try not to make, assumptions, right? A veteran teacher might want to be coached. We can't assume they don't.
Yes.
And brand new teacher might not be ready yet. They might be so overwhelmed that
Hmm.
they need a little time to get ready. So I guess everybody's different. So you have to have
Hmm.
pretty good systems to manage all of that information that's always incoming about
Hmm.
who's ready, who's not, what's my relationship
Yeah.
status with people, things like that.
And I love the authentic engagement piece.
Yeah.
It has to be something that's meaningful for them,
Mhm.
because I've found when I come to the table with what I think, it's
Yeah.
not necessarily what they think.
Oh,
And that
surprise,
right there can break the whole partnership. So
surprise.
authentically engaging in those conversations with teachers to get them with some ownership to
Yeah.
the coaching piece. And I think with the authentic engagement, you know, again, not coming in with something that you want them to do, but sometimes that means, okay, we might stray away from the original plan just a bit so that you can engage in the coaching piece and we can go forward from there. Because I
Yeah.
think a lot of times when people look at coaching frameworks and programs, that they think it has to be this rigid to begin
Yeah.
with.
Yeah.
And we have to allow some flexibility in our approach, which is why I really like the authentic engagement piece.
Yeah.
Meeting them where they are at that time and
Yeah.
getting them on board to form that partnership. So I think that's crucial. And here's another question I have for you because new coaches sometimes new coaches want to just do everything
Yes.
and they can't do everything. What are some of the mistakes new coaches make when they're trying to implement student-centered coaching?
That's such a great question. I think a lot of new coaches have imposter syndrome and they feel kind
Mm.
of like, I have to prove myself, I have to be busy. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so they may take on duties that don't align with their role. And
Mm-hmm.
think very clear about what does it mean to be a coach. And I always just see that as build your confidence through experiences. So
Mm-hmm.
jump, so one of the worst things I think a coach can do is to just never jump into the pool, right? And sit on
Mm-hmm.
the side, busy myself with things that aren't really coaching work, organizing the book room or managing materials, things like that,
Mm-hmm.
and not actually having the confidence to jump into a coaching cycle.
Mm-hmm.
So when we work with school districts, teams of coaches, I push hard to make sure, between now and our next visit, now and the next time I'm there, you should have at least jumped into a coaching cycle. Because how else
Mm-hmm.
are you going to build your comfort and confidence than doing it? And
Mm-hmm.
so I'd say holding back too much is a problem sometimes. I think also going in and thinking you have to be the expert in all
Mm-hmm.
things is also a common mistake early in coaches' work. And not trusting that co-construction and being a thinking partner and working with somebody
Mm-hmm.
is valuable and it's inherently valuable. I
Mm-hmm.
New coaches sometimes struggle when they're coaching outside of the known content area. So if they're coaching a grade level they've never taught or a subject in secondary they've never taught,
Mm-hmm.
they might feel like, how can I contribute here? And we find actually that sometimes coaches are better outside of their core content area because they're less bossy.
Yes. I
Raise
can't
your
tell you
hand.
everything to do. I can't because it's not my content area, but I can tell you instructionally what works well with the kids. And yes,
Yeah.
uh-huh.
And I'm a better listener and a better questioner. I have
Mm-hmm.
to really build on your ideas instead of,
Mm-hmm.
I always joke, don't should on people. Don't go in and tell them what they should do all the time. So we shit on people a lot more if we're really like, I used to do it this way. So we don't want that.
Mm-hmm.
Those are a few things that come to mind when it comes to supporting new coaches.
Mm-hmm.
Also, getting them, they're shoring up their principal coach partnership,
Mm-hmm.
making sure their principal, that they're meeting regularly, that they have a shared vision. We invest a lot of time there too.
Mm-hmm.
What comes to mind for you with new coaches? I'm
With
curious.
with new coaches, I think sometimes as a new coach, we go in thinking we have to solve all the problems
Yes,
for
that's a
all
good
the
one.
teachers.
Yep.
And it's not that, but I don't know if it's because they're new to coaching and hadn't had any real true guidance yet, or if
Yeah.
this is just their nature. Because we're not, this is a nurturing profession, right? And so
Yeah.
we want to help everyone. We want to make sure everyone succeeds. So
Yep.
as a new coach, sometimes they go in thinking that they have to help all of these teachers in all of these ways. And if all of this doesn't happen, then all is for naught.
Yeah.
And just to get that transition from, dipping your toe in the water, the analogy, what came in my mind, the image that came in my mind when you said that, coach is not doing all of these extraneous activities, but
Yeah.
it's almost like jumping rope. The rope is turning and they're
Yeah.
hesitating, like, should I get in? Should I not? Should I go? Should
Uh-huh.
I stop? And so that's what I was picturing
Yeah.
when you were saying that, like, okay, I am, I'm not. Yeah, I'm not. But here's what I like about student-centered coaching. As you said, you were just in Wayne County training us on this method. And one of the slides that resonates most with me is that 60-40% slide.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
What coaching is 60% of the time and what coaching is 40% of the time. And to extend that, the coaching cycle, the 6 week coaching cycle or the full coaching cycle or the mini coaching cycle.
Uh-huh.
And I just think there are so many, you made it quite clear for those who really don't understand the concept of coaching and what a cycle looks like is
Yeah.
crystal clear. So with the coaching cycles, how would you what I guess advice would you give to districts and schools who are just starting
Mhm.
this student-centered coaching and are kind of like, oh, I don't know, is it a mini cycle? Is it not? Am I coaching or am I not? What
Yeah.
advice would you give to people like them or us? A
Yeah.
friend is asking.
Okay. Well, that's I mean that 60/40 is a great goal to have as your what you work toward, but it takes some time to get there. So let me
Hmm.
just back up a little bit. So what you're referring to is the idea that we recommend 60% of a coach's time to be in coaching cycles. A coaching cycle is 4 to 6 weeks. You meet once a week at least for planning. You're in the room a couple times. We're measuring our growth. We're formatively assessing. We're co planning. We're co teaching. And it's attached to a unit of study. So it's like, let's work on fractional understanding. Let's
Hmm.
work on writing an informational text. Let's work on understanding, comparing ratios. So that's a coaching cycle. Typically, that 4 to 6 week long process would start at the beginning of a unit, usually, and end at the end of a unit. So it's
Hmm.
very curricularly focused. So when we say 60% of our time is in coaching cycles, one useful little tidbit to understand is a coach who's fully implementing,
Hmm.
like really all in, been trained, knows what they're doing, ready to go. That would be happening with about 4 to 6 teachers at
Hmm.
once. So you're talking, and maybe at the very beginning it's one teacher, and then you
Hmm.
get two, and then you build to three, and by December you have 4 teachers in
Hmm.
cycles. But that process builds gradually over time.
Hmm.
So to get there, I'll talk about the 40% in a second, but to get to that 60% in coaching cycles, a couple skills have to be built. One is get comfortable with the process, know the steps in a coaching cycle.
Hmm.
Secondly, use our coaching logs that we recommend. And I can always share those with you, Melanie, if you want to include those with this when you
Okay,
post it.
great. Thank you.
I can email those to you.
Hmm.
But the so the logs and the process and the just being really tactical in moving through a coaching cycle
Hmm.
is the learning we do early with folks.
Hmm.
So that piece is building gradually. You might start, like I said, with one teacher. You might go to two. By the way, coaching cycles could also be with more than one teacher. So you
Hmm.
might be working with two teachers in a cycle or three
Hmm.
teachers in a cycle. And there's a lot of skill building in that because you got to learn the moves for coaching in the
Hmm.
classroom, learn the moves for co-planning, learn the moves for assessing the impact. There's so much. But then the other 40% side is other work that really matters too. So mini
Hmm.
coaching cycles, you mentioned those. Mini
Hmm.
cycles are just partnering on a couple lessons with teachers, but still getting into the classroom and using student evidence.
Hmm.
Planning with your principal, meeting with your principal is a piece of that 40%. Maybe joining PLCs or data teams
Hmm.
or, coaching team meetings, things like that. So informal support would be on that 40% side. And another
Hmm.
thing that's on that 40% side, I'm sure folks are wondering about is supporting classroom management, supporting
Hmm.
behavioral stuff, supporting just those sort of informal one-off type coaching conversations.
Hmm.
You said earlier we want to be flexible and responsive.
Hmm.
That 40% side allows that, right? It gives you a chance to, if a teacher's in crisis, you can go support them. But we want to be mostly coaching in cycles. That's why it's the 60%
Hmm.
because That's our deepest, most measurable work. That's the work that's going to really impact student learning and
Mhm.
instructional practice.
Mhm. Thank you for breaking that down because so many coaches they find themselves in this conundrum, so to speak. Like, if I'm not in a coaching cycle, but I'm doing all of these other things that are important to the coaching cycle, is that considered being part of the coaching cycle as well? And
Yeah.
so having that other support, for example, if I'm helping a teacher prepare for a side-by-side conversation, co-planning,
Mhm.
and I need time to look at the lesson myself so that I can be a little familiar,
Yeah.
and with going in and help to co-plan. Does that or does that not count in as being a part of the coaching cycle? And so those kind of nuances that kind of, have people, coaches stepping back and say, wait a minute, let me reevaluate this. Is
Mhm.
this a coaching cycle or isn't? Is it not? But I think at the end of the day, the 60 and the 40 equal 100, right? And so all of it combined is doing the work of coaching. I
Mhm.
think what we have to be careful of is doing those what I call miscellaneous tasks, such as making copies, such as doing the laminating and all of those types of things. Doing the work that means the most for student achievement is first and foremost. And like you just said a couple of sentences ago, being in that 60% is where we should be as coaches.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Because we know for change to happen, it's going to take time, and we need to
Hmm.
have connected conversations across time
Hmm.
on something important. So that's the why.
Hmm.
Uh-huh.
And shifting just a bit because, coaching has been around. Like you said, you had a coach, but it was a staff developer. My
Uh-huh.
coach was an instructional specialist. And so
Uh-huh.
coaching has been around, but we hadn't formalized the term instructional coaching yet.
Yeah.
And I enjoy the evolution. I enjoy witnessing and being a part of the evolution of coaching from it being this broad thing to more intentional and strategic with what we want to see, especially when it comes to student achievement. But one thing I want to ask you, because you've worked with so many schools in so many districts,
Yeah.
what are the most promising trends you see in the coaching field right now?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I would think gradually, as teachers come into the profession, they're more used to this kind of collaboration.
Hmm.
So I'm seeing a lot of younger would it be Gen Zs, I think,
Yes, disease.
coming in and really not being surprised that they're expected to collaborate. I
Hmm.
think
Hmm.
this is really incredible. So that's one positive trend. I'm seeing, I think, the expectation for ongoing assessment that is
Hmm.
built into our framework becoming quite normalized.
Hmm.
Um, the use of data is common, but what
Hmm.
that's a double-edged sword because what what we have to do then when data is heavily used in a system, we have to help people understand that we're talking about student evidence when we're talking about data within a coaching conversations.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
And so it's a kind of data, but it's not NWEA data
Yes.
or iReady data.
Hmm.
So that's an interesting pair with all the data coming, and we love it. And it creates a challenge because that's not really what we're complementing that with our use of student evidence. So that's a
Hmm.
trend. I also am starting to see um, this one's probably the most important, and that's that the whenever we work with systems with school districts, we say, "Are you willing to include principals in these
Hmm.
conversations?" And if they say no, we may not agree to work with them. Like it's
Hmm.
that important to us.
Hmm.
And so that answer has been yes, not only yes, but yes with three exclamation points very often lately, right?
Hmm.
People know that principals need to be in these conversations.
Hmm.
And so when we're talking about all that's happening in schools, we can't do this around them. We have to do it with them.
Hmm. And especially since I know the last 10, 15 years, there's been this heavy push for almost like a redefinition of what a principal is. not the
Exactly.
manager of the school, but an instructional leader. And
Yes.
so principals have to be engaged in this process in order for them to know what the expectations are and how to move the work forward. What do you say? The muscle and the support? The,
Uh-huh. The,
you have to have that support from an instructional leader. And so,
yeah.
yeah, I think it's imperative that, I don't blame you if you kind of think twice about if a school district says, "Oh, not the principal's," like, okay, what's really going on here?
And when we were with you in Wayne County, you experienced that because we had principals come on day one
That's right.
with coaches, and then we had coaches stay for day two.
Mhm.
So
And it was so important for them to be there because my principal and I have these different conversations now.
yeah.
And so my principal and I had a standing meeting on the books anyway. And
Uh-huh.
so we would talk, but our conversations are a little different now.
That's
And
awesome.
they know, like my principal knows, okay, like Melanie, how can I support you? And so it's more of that type of partnership with the principal. The coach principal partnership is also imperative when we're talking about how we can support teachers.
Yeah.
All of us work in conjunction for
Yes.
student achievement, and any one of those components that are missed, that are left out, we're
Yeah.
not providing the best that we can for the kids. So,
That is
yes.
exactly true. Yep.
So you know what? I also like to have a little fun. If you can't tell in my personality already,
Yeah.
I love to have a little fun. And so this is a question that I had that I'm like, I'm gonna ask Diane this question. And I have not asked anyone this before, but I'm really, truly, I'm curious as to if you could have dinner with any educational thinker, past or present, who would it be and why?
Hmm. Well, I'm glad you gave me a heads up on this question because I had to think about this
Uh-huh.
one. And it's going to sound like the most boring dinner you've ever heard because my answer, I think, is the John Dewey. Do you remember learning
Oh,
about John
yes.
Dewey in graduate school?
We first,
I think,
yes.
uh-huh. I think he came to mind because we're writing a second edition of Student Centered Coaching the Moves, and we
Hmm.
quote John Dewey in the book, and
Hmm.
which made me go back and do a deep dive into his history. And the quote we used is we do not learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on experience. And if folks don't know who he is, he really was the first sort of progressive educator where he believed that we learn by doing, and he believed that education is a democratic right and it's core to a good democracy. And so he to me seemed like a pretty cool dude. I mean, would be I'm sure not as casual as I'm used to, but I think he was such a groundbreaker in the sense of really creating real learning opportunities for
Hmm.
students well ahead of his time.
Hmm.
So that's who I would want to have dinner with is John Dewey, one of the forefathers of our education
Yes.
that looks today.
One of the first people, I think all of us who went to a traditional education program, I think he was
Exactly.
like the first person we learned about in
And
educational
I don't know
theory.
if I appreciated him at the time.
I know I didn't. I know I didn't. I was trying to get through a program. I'm just going to be honest.
Too.
But as we reflect,
Yeah,
as he said,
yeah,
as we look back, I've come to appreciate many of those people we
yes,
learned about in school because, of course, we're trying to get through this program. But yeah, it's
yeah.
that would be an interesting dinner because his theories and his thoughts and his pedagogy are well appropriate now, like
I know. That's the thing
right
that I
now.
would love to tell him we're still working on this. He probably say, "Are you kidding me?"
Yeah, yeah, John. Yes, sir. We're still working on
We're
this.
still working on it.
So here's another one. What is one coaching aha moment that you'll never forget?
Yeah, I think the one was the one I shared that was
Earlier.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think that idea of like where are the kids and what you're doing and me not even knowing the answer to that, I think is probably
Mm-hmm.
the um the most profound one is we talked about teacher buy-in and not shitting on teachers and not
Uh-huh.
telling teachers what to do. And one time I always share this with groups, but I got a note in my mailbox saying from a fourth grade teacher in my school saying, please don't come back to my classroom again. And that was a good learning. That was also a pretty profound humiliation, but I think we learn from these things, right?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And I was like, ooh, what was I doing wrong? Well, I was going in and bossing this poor guy around, telling him what to do, trying
Like
to
a
get him to teach
conductor.
yeah, trying to get him to teach the way I taught. And so I learned a lot from that one as well.
Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. It's
It's
yeah, those
humbling.
very. Okay, here's another one. Finish this sentence. A great coach is someone who.
Ooh, I would say builds partnerships with teachers
Mm-hmm.
in ways that impact student learning.
Okay. Yeah. And speaking of instructional coaching, let's see what we could come up with. If you could rename
Oh, yeah. I already have.
instructional coaching. Oh, let's hear it.
I'm sorry I cut you off, but the
No.
question was say the question again, just in
Okay.
case.
If you could rename instructional coaching to better reflect what it really is, what would you call it?
I learned this from international schools where I've worked, and they
Hmm.
call coaches learning coaches, and they
Okay.
call them instructional coaches. And so I was working with Boise Public Schools, and I've worked with them now for 4 years. I think I shared that with you a little bit in the
Hmm.
past. And I had the opportunity to identify what are we going to call our coaches. They were hiring 50 coaches, and I challenged them, do you want to call them instructional coaches? Well, they were going to. That was their plan because that's what
Hmm.
we call them. And I said, but they're really about learning, aren't they? And so the the assistant superintendent trusted me and she said, you know what? That makes sense. Words matter. It's not just about instruction. That's very old school. It's
Hmm.
about learning and learning for the teacher, learning for the
Hmm.
student. And so we call them learning coaches. And I wish more places called their coaches learning
I
coaches.
think I can agree with that
Hmm.
because we are always learning. We are all, if
Yeah.
we don't, I think there's something wrong with us. I think
Yep.
that we all are lifelong learners. And so
Yep.
that's very appropriate for that renaming of that, not
Yeah.
another definition, but the renaming. I like that. Learning coaches. I like that. Okay, so you know
Yeah.
what? I love talking to you and I could talk to you forever, but I'm pretty sure you have things to do and people to see.
Yeah.
And
Well,
we're going to
can
have
I
to
just come back to one thing before we wrap up? Can I just underline something you said before we go that I
absolutely.
thought you use that jump rope metaphor. And I
Yes.
want to I want to really think more about that because you said it's like sitting on the side and wondering if you jump in. And I just had in my mind, I love a good metaphor. So I'm grateful to you for creating that one for my brain to
Hmm.
attach to.
Hmm.
And I think about when you get in that jump rope, when you do jump in, how much joy there is.
Mm,
And joy of being in that, doing that,
yes.
it is. And I just picture all the videos I've seen of girls jumping and jumping in and jumping out and
Uh-huh.
how much joy there is. And I think that's a big piece of what we're trying to do here is to
Hmm.
make coaching less of a grind, to make coaching less of a burden, less of a, oh, it takes too much time, but
Hmm.
putting joy back in it. And so
Hmm.
thank you for that metaphor because it made me think of that.
You're welcome. And even like being in the rope, now I'm thinking further. And once you have enough nerve to get into the rope, you get in there, you're jumping and you're looking around, and then you might turn around as you're jumping in the rope. And you're
Yeah.
doing other things because now you're becoming more of a skilled jumper. And you might ask the turners to go a little faster because
Yeah.
now you have a better grip on this. So yeah, that's I like that.
Me too.
Okay,
Thanks for
okay.
that metaphor.
Okay. I think I'm But thank you, Diane, so much
Thank you.
for joining us this evening. And for our listeners and our watchers, please don't forget to not only support Diane and reading her wonderful books and everything. Even if you're not in the framework, just read the book for ideas and the
Yeah.
moves and all of those types of things to help you with your coaching. And I will also like to invite everyone to the 2026 Get Engaged Coaching and Leadership Conference that's going to be 2 days in July this year. I think it's July 8th and 9th. It's a Thursday and Friday, 2026. I said this year, 2026. And we have a phenomenal lineup waiting for you to join us virtually. More information is coming about that. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Diane and ask her any question you would like to ask that I haven't asked, that maybe we talked about and something generated and said, oh, I would like to ask her. Ask her directly. Diane, how could they get in touch with you?
Yep, just Diane at dianesweeney.com is easy.
Plain and
Yep.
simple.
With one N, Diane at, yeah. You can just Google it. We have a website with all kinds of resources loaded there for you, a blog, online courses, our books, comparisons of which books to read, all kinds of different info. I would say go to the website, dianesweeney.com.
Go to the website and get
Yep.
all of your answers there.
Yeah.
And thank you again, Diane. I'm so happy
Thank
that you were
you.
here.
It
Good
was
night, everyone, and we'll see you on the next edition of Coach Talk.
Thanks so much, Melanie.
Thank you for
Bye.
coming.